Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're tackling SpaceX's plan to colonize Mars. It's ambitious, to say the least. We're using this Wikipedia article all about it. Just access today, November 22nd, 2024, to really break this down. Is SpaceX's vision a realistic possibility? Is this a reckless gamble, or is it something in between?
It's certainly a fascinating topic. And as you said, there are very strong opinions on all sides of this issue.
Okay, well, let's start with the man himself, Elon Musk. I mean, he's been talking about Mars for years. But did you know he was involved with the Mars Society all the way back in 2001?
Yeah, his interest in Mars isn't a recent development at all. It's really been a driving force behind SpaceX from the start. Musk has very consistently argued that for humanity to survive long term, we have to become a multiplanetary species.
I mean, he's even said that colonizing Mars would be glorious, but also acknowledging the inherent dangers involved. It almost feels like a science fiction novel coming to life. But what are the real-world steps they're actually taking to do this?
Well, initially, SpaceX was exploring a concept called Red Dragon. It was a modified Dragon 2 spacecraft, designed to be a relatively low-cost Mars lander.
Right, but that was eventually scrapped. And then came Starship. And this is where things get really interesting. It's a fully reusable, super heavy lift launch vehicle designed for deep space travel. So reusability is key to their plan, right?
Absolutely. Reusable spacecraft drastically reduce those launch costs, which is essential for making frequent trips to Mars, even remotely feasible.
And it's had some impressive successes already. You know, the third and fourth test flights in 2024. For the first time, both stages landed back on Earth after reaching orbit. I mean, that's a huge step.
Yeah, those tests marked significant milestones in Starship's development. It really highlighted their commitment to pushing the boundaries of space travel.
To support this, they built these dedicated facilities, Starbase, which is the launch site, and Star Factory, the production facility, both located in Boca Chica, Texas. They're aiming to produce one Starship per day. Can you even imagine?
It's an incredibly ambitious goal, to say the least. It speaks to the scale of their operation and the speed at which they're trying to move. But of course, getting the spacecraft built is just one piece of the puzzle. What about actually getting to Mars?
Right, they're taking a phased approach, starting with uncrewed cargo missions to transport equipment, habitats, and supplies. Seems logical to set up the infrastructure before you send humans. And they're relying on something called in situ resource utilization, ISRU. What exactly does that mean?
So ISRU is essentially about using resources found on Mars itself to create things like fuel and oxygen and building materials. It's not feasible to ship everything from Earth. So being able to leverage Martian resources is crucial for that long-term sustainability.
So they're going to live off the land in a sense. That makes sense.
That's
The
right.
timeline for all of this is pretty aggressive, isn't it? They're planning to launch 5 uncrewed starships to Mars in 2026. I mean, that is just around the corner.
It is a very ambitious timeline. But you're right, they have shown a remarkable ability to hit these challenging targets. And if those missions are successful, the next step would be sending crewed missions, potentially as early as 2029. These initial crews would focus on setting up a basic base, those very first steps toward a permanent Martian settlement.
A base on Mars in our lifetime. Almost hard to grasp. What about the long term, though? How many people are we actually talking about sending to Mars?
Well, SpaceX's stated goal is to send 1 million people to Mars by 2050. Think about that for a second. That's more than the population of insert listener city for personal connection. To achieve that, they would need a fleet of 1,000 starships.
1,000 starships blasting off to Mars. I mean, the visual alone is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But how realistic is that, really? We're talking about a completely different planet with a harsh and unforgiving environment. It can't be as simple as just showing up and setting up camp, right?
You're right. It is an incredibly complex endeavor. And the journey itself is a huge hurdle. The transit time between Earth and Mars is estimated to be 80 to 150 days each way.
Okay, that's a long time to be in a confined spacecraft, to put it mildly. Okay, so we have a better understanding of SpaceX's vision. But now let's dig into the reception. A project this big must be generating a lot of opinions, both positive and negative.
Oh, absolutely. The idea of colonizing Mars is a topic that sparks debate and discussion like few others. There are strong arguments to be made on both sides.
So let's start with the arguments for Mars colonization. What are the key factors that make Mars a viable candidate for this kind of endeavor?
Well, one of the biggest points in favor of Mars is the availability of resources. We know there's water ice locked away in permafrost and glaciers, as well as carbon dioxide and nitrogen in the atmosphere.
So the potential for generating breathable air, water, even fuel right there on Mars, that would be crucial for creating a self-sufficient colony. Are there other arguments that support Mars colonization?
Well, there's a huge potential for scientific advancement. A permanent human presence on Mars would allow for in-depth research into its geology, its climate, and even the potential for past or present life. And, of course, the technological innovation required for survival on Mars could have massive benefits for life back here on Earth as well.
Oh, that's an interesting point. The challenges could drive breakthroughs that we can't even anticipate yet. But let's not shy away from the other side of the coin. What are some of the arguments against Mars colonization?
Well, one of the most prominent criticisms is the cost. The resources required for colonizing Mars are astronomical, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Some argue that those resources could be better used to address pressing issues here on Earth, like climate change and poverty.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. We are facing some serious challenges here at home. Are there ethical concerns about the potential impact of human settlement on Mars as well? Certainly. There's a risk of disrupting the Martian environment and potentially contaminating it with Earth-based life. Planetary protection is a crucial part of space exploration. We need to be extremely careful not to harm any potential ecosystems that might exist on Mars.
So we have ethical considerations, the potential environmental impact,
Yeah.
and of course the sheer technical challenges of keeping humans alive and well on a planet like Mars. And then there's a human factor. I mean, it's one thing to visit Mars for a short mission, but permanently living on a different planet is a completely different story.
Exactly. We have to consider those long-term psychological effects of isolation confinement and the lack of familiar surroundings. There's still so much we don't know about the impact this would have on the human mind and body. And then there's the question of governance. Who gets to make the rules on Mars?
Right, that's a fascinating question. We touched on that legal gray area a little bit earlier surrounding, private companies and celestial bodies. But what is SpaceX's actual plan for governing a Martian colony? Well, they've stated their intention to establish a direct democracy on Mars, with laws based on self-determination.
So instead of electing representatives, the colonists would vote directly on laws and decisions. I mean, that sounds incredibly idealistic, but wouldn't a system like that be super vulnerable to manipulation, especially in such a small, isolated colony?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Direct democracy has its challenges even in well-established societies on Earth, and on Mars with a relatively small and isolated population. The potential for undue influence or groupthink could be significant.
And not to mention the potential conflict with international law. Like you said, existing treaties consider Mars a province of all mankind, not subject to claims of sovereignty by any nation, or seemingly a private company.
It's a situation that will undoubtedly raise complex legal and political questions. As Mars colonization moves forward, how will SpaceX navigate those existing treaties? How will they ensure fairness and representation in their proposed system? These are all questions that remain to be answered.
It seems like creating a functioning Martian society is going to be just as challenging as getting there in the first place.
Yeah, it's a reminder that colonizing Mars isn't just about overcoming technical hurdles. It's about building a new society from the ground up, hopefully one that learns from the successes and failures of human history.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the practicalities of actually living on Mars. Assuming we can get people there and figure out, who's in charge, what are some of the biggest challenges that Martian colonists would face on a day-to-day basis?
Well, one of the most immediate challenges is the thin Martian atmosphere, which is mostly carbon dioxide. Humans can't breathe that. So colonists will need to live in pressurized habitats and wear spacesuits whenever they venture outside.
So imagine living your life essentially inside a sealed bubble. It doesn't exactly sound very spacious or comfortable. So what would these habitats need to provide to keep humans alive and healthy?
Well, the habitats would have to maintain a breathable atmosphere, regulate temperature, and offer protection from that harsh radiation environment on Mars. Early Martian habitats are likely to be quite cramped and functional, prioritizing survival over luxury. But it's not just about having air to breathe. It's about meeting all of our basic needs in an extremely challenging environment.
Right. Which brings up a very critical question: food. Will colonists be able to grow crops on Mars?
That's the goal. ISRU isn't just about fuel and building materials. It also includes developing methods for Martian agriculture. They'll need to create specialized greenhouses, carefully control the environment, and find ways to enrich that Martian soil.
Martian farming, a whole new science, a far cry from anything we do here on Earth. What about water? I mean, we know there's water ice on Mars, but accessing it and making it safe to drink is another hurdle.
Absolutely. They'll need to develop systems for extracting that water ice,
Mm-hmm.
purifying it, and then distributing it to the habitats, all while minimizing energy consumption.
It's incredible to think about the level of innovation and resourcefulness required just to meet those very basic needs. But there are also the longer-term effects to consider, like the impact of Mars's lower gravity.
That's right. Mars has about 38% of Earth's gravity. And we know that prolonged exposure to low gravity can cause muscle and bone loss, as well as cardiovascular problems.
So regular exercise would be essential, I imagine, but would that even be enough to counteract those effects?
It would definitely help.
Yeah.
But colonists might also need to wear special suits or utilize other devices to simulate Earth's gravity and mitigate those long-term health risks.
And we can't forget about radiation. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but can you kind of elaborate on the dangers of radiation on Mars and what kind of protection colonists would need?
Sure, Mars has a much thinner atmosphere than Earth, which means less protection from harmful radiation from the sun and cosmic rays. To survive, habitats will need to be shielded, potentially using thick layers of Martian soil. Colonists would also need to limit their time outside and wear specialized suits with additional radiation protection.
It sounds like living on Mars would require a constant awareness of these environmental hazards and a real dedication to mitigating the risks.
It would be a true test of human resilience and adaptability. But amidst all these challenges, there's also an undeniable element of wonder and excitement. We're talking about potentially unlocking new knowledge about the history of our solar system, the origins of life, and maybe even discovering evidence of past or present life on Mars.
Imagine the implications of finding evidence of life beyond Earth. It would completely change our understanding of our place in the universe.
It's a possibility that captures the imagination. But even if we don't find signs of Martian life, studying the planet itself could give us invaluable insights into the early history of our own planet. Mars is like a frozen snapshot of the early solar system, holding clues about the conditions that existed billions of years ago.
It's fascinating to think that we could unlock secrets about the origins of life itself by studying a planet millions of miles away. But all this talk about pushing the boundaries of science and exploration begs the question, at what cost?
You're raising an important point.
I mean, we've talked about the logistics, the potential scientific discoveries, but colonizing another planet raises some pretty significant ethical questions, too. You know, we're essentially talking about transforming Mars to suit our needs, and that's a topic that sparks a lot of debate.
Yeah, it's a complex issue for sure. Some people argue that we have a moral obligation to protect Mars in its pristine state, to preserve its potential for indigenous life, even if we haven't found it yet.
Right. I mean, that's a valid point. We do need to be mindful of the impact we could have on another planet. But then there's also the argument that if we have the ability to make Mars habitable for humans, shouldn't we do it? Wouldn't that actually expand the reach of life and consciousness in the universe?
It's a question that forces us to really examine our values and priorities. Do we have the right to terraform another planet, even if it means altering its environment? Where do we draw the line between exploration and exploitation?
Yeah, those are tough questions. There are no easy answers. When it comes to weighing the potential benefits against the potential risks, I feel like we need a whole new ethical framework for interacting with other worlds.
I agree. We need to learn from the mistakes of our past, from the history of colonialism on Earth, and create a new model for engaging with other planets, one that prioritizes responsibility and sustainability.
Okay, so assuming we can navigate those ethical complexities and actually establish a self-sustaining colony on Mars, what would that mean for humanity? What kind of future are we talking about?
It's a question that sparks the imagination. Will we see the emergence of a distinct Martian culture, separate and unique from Earth's? Will Mars become a hub for innovation, pushing the boundaries of technology and social progress?
It's fascinating to think about the possibilities,
Yeah.
but is there also a risk that Mars could simply become an extension of Earth, replicating our existing systems and problems? Would we just be exporting our issues to another planet?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Colonizing Mars isn't a magic solution to Earth's problems. It's an opportunity to build a new society. But it comes with the responsibility to do it better, to learn from our past, and create a more just and sustainable future.
It's a reminder that this isn't just about technology and logistics. It's about who we are as a species and what kind of legacy we want to leave behind. This whole conversation has been a wild ride, full of mind-boggling possibilities and thought-provoking questions. Is SpaceX's vision for Mars realistic? Is it ethical? Is it even desirable? I guess we'll have to wait and see how the story unfolds.
Yeah, the future of Mars colonization is still uncertain. But the very fact that we're having these conversations, that we're seriously considering the prospect of building a new home on another planet, it speaks volumes about human ambition and our innate desire to explore the unknown.
And who knows what incredible discoveries and advancements await us along the way.
Exactly. The journey to Mars is as much about the journey inward as it is about reaching outward. It's a journey of self-discovery, of pushing our limits, and redefining what it means to be human.
Well, it has been an incredible deep dive. And thanks for joining us on this exploration.
And until next time, keep looking up, keep asking questions, and keep exploring the boundless possibilities that lie ahead.